Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Bruno Kreisky Forum, I would like to kindly welcome you to our evening on Afghanistan. My name is Tobias Matern. I'm a journalist with Süddeutsche Zeitung and will be your host tonight. I am excited and thrilled to have a very distinguished guest from Afghanistan sitting next to me, Ms. Fawzia Koofi. Ms. Koofi is born in 1975 in Badakhshan province in the north of Afghanistan. She is a very prominent Afghan politician, was and is up to this very day a very active women's rights activist and author of several books. She was a speaker of the Afghan parliament, a co-speaker. She did survive 2 assassination attempts. That shows how dangerous the life is that she is living. She was also part of the Afghan government delegation that tried to negotiate a peace settlement with the Taliban in Doha, a process that eventually collapsed. And after the Taliban regained power in Kabul in the summer of 2021, she left Afghanistan, but she's continuing her fight for the rights of women for self-determination from exile. So I'm very pleased and excited. Please welcome Ms. Fawzia Koofi.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Koofi, let's get right into it. You are in Vienna for an international conference, and this conference is trying to design a path for the future of Afghanistan. Before we talk about the future of Afghanistan, maybe we should talk about the current situation and your assessment. What would you say? How is the situation of your fellow countrymen and women at this point?
Thank you so much, Tobias, for having me. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the Austrian government and the forum for hosting already 5th round of the conference. We call it Vienna Process for a Democratic Afghanistan, where it brings men and women from very diverse background to speak about what they should do for their country. But this is part of future now. About the current situation, not much of a good news. Unfortunately, the situation is getting worse for people who are in Afghanistan on the ground. From an economic point of view, a lot of people have lost jobs because obviously their jobs were taken over by the Taliban. Of very professional, highly educated people who were holding master and bachelor's degrees, highly educated, their jobs were taken over. And in Afghanistan, because the private sector is not very strong, the main source of jobs and employment is the government. Mm-hmm. So when the government shifts, every time the ordinary people who are highly educated are the mainly affected. So ordinary people are like suffering from poverty based on UN, as well as the reports from World Bank indicates that more than 90% of people are suffering from poverty. And Tobias, this is a country which is rich in natural and resources and minerals. It's a country that has billions and trillions of dollars underground in the form of natural resources. It's a country that is very beautiful. When sometimes I look at the mountains of Vienna, not many European countries have surrounded by mountains, and it makes it very beautiful. It reminds me of Afghanistan and its beauty, because it is a mountainous country, very diverse culture. So it's a beautiful country, potential for tourist attraction, but also, if it's safe, but also billions underground in terms of natural resources, but a poor nation, people who are really suffering from poverty. On top of that, you have a power that is actually taking every right from the woman.
Yes.
So they have basically announced a war against women. And it's getting only worse, because the first time they came to power on the 15th of August 2021, I was in Afghanistan. On 17th of August 2021, and we were in touch, right? Because you were, when I was in negotiation, you were always making reports for. And no, you were not. I had the pleasure of always acting as you were a local reporter from Afghanistan, because Tobias was always in touch with me, trying to get information about the peace process, etc. So on the 17th of September, so like 1 month after they came, they announced banning of female going to school beyond grade 6, which is like 10 to 12 years old. So any woman who is beyond grade 6, age 10 or 12, is banned from going to school. But they allowed university students, and we were happy at least the university students go to university. In December 2022, on the 26th of December 2022, they banned women from going to university. 2 days later, they banned women from working with humanitarian aid and NGOs. The first day they came, they banned women from working in the offices, followed by like 100 edicts, one after the other, banning women from everything. Recently, like a month ago, on 2nd of December, 2 months ago, they banned women from going to medical studies, like becoming nurse or midwives. So, for instance, in 3 years' time, literally, we will have enormous reduction in the number of nurses and doctors and midwives, especially in the rural areas where women access to medical services are already very, very poor. And this is going to increase maternal and infant mortality and disrupt our health system. So basically, they announced a full-fledged war against women, and I don't understand why.
Yes, I mean, the world community was thinking that Taliban 2.0, as they were calling it when they came to power, because obviously the Taliban had a first share of power back in the 90s, and then the regime collapsed in 2001, that this would be a more moderate version. But if we listen to you carefully, if we follow the situation, I sense that you would not feel any difference compared to how the Taliban were in their first regime.
I mean, in some occasions, they have become even further radicalized and, repressive when it comes to, for instance, I was a medical college student when the first time Taliban came. I was in my first year. So they banned women in junior position of first year, like me. I was stopped from becoming a medical doctor, right? But they allow women in senior students, like grade 3 or 4, to continue their medical studies. But now they ban women from continuing medical studies, which is even a regression if you compare it to the first time. Yes, there was a narrative that was created of Taliban 2.0, and unfortunately this narrative was created by some diplomats who were actually involved in that peace process. And it was a narrative
you mean Doha, the Doha process?
In Doha process, yes, in Doha process. It was a narrative that we were all trapped into that narrative. And the moment that the Taliban took, I was looking for that 2.0 because, they started banning women. They started targeting women. So until now, I want to know, where are the Taliban 2.0? Yes, recently we have seen that because of the power struggle, some of the Taliban, not very high level, they have started speaking against their leader edicts. And they are forced to leave the country, or they are forced to go in exile. 1 or 2 people already actually went to exile. But the whole movement existence is based on suppression of women.
But the whole movement, or the whole regime as it is firmly in power. That's at least what people who are in Kabul are telling me. Why is there not more resistance from within Afghanistan against them? What would you think?
I mean, there are small groups here and there. I mean, from a theoretical point of view, for any movement to re-emerge, they need at least 18 months, right? So it's 3 years. There are here and there, but I must say that Taliban have millions of dollars of American weapons and guns that were left in Afghanistan in their control. A government that was functioning. Yes, there were corruption, there was problem, but it was a functioning government, right? All the institutions was functioning before 2021. And so they took over, or Afghanistan was given to them from a functioning government. So they actually inherited all the machinery, equipment, everything that was given to our army and police from American. So they actually have a heavily military that they're only using to suppress their opposition. They're using not only suppress their opposition, sometimes also the women groups.
Yes.
We have seen in some people, including from my group, my colleagues, when they protest on the streets, the response from some of the Taliban soldiers is directly shooting at them. Right? So they're using all the machinery to brutally suppress the opposition. But majority of people, I can say that probably 80 to 85% of the population is not happy with the Taliban, but they don't have alternative.
That's right, they're not happy. That's my sentiment from conversations I have with Afghans as well. What they are happy about, even though they despise being ruled by people who tell them what to do or what not to do, especially the women, is the absence of fighting. That's one thing they always say, the absence of fighting. Why do you think was it not possible to negotiate a settlement back in the day, back in the Doha days, that would have stopped the fighting and that would have led to an inclusive and sort of peaceful and stable situation? What was the mistake there?
I think the problem, if you look back to the history and see what went wrong, I put in my, because I was involved in most of these processes. Either I was part of it or I was watching it closely or I was affected by it. So I put all the story in my recent book called Letters to My Sisters, which is published in French language. Hopefully it will be published in other languages as well. However, to answer to your question, why the peace process did not last to make it an inclusive process, I think there were serious problems with the process from day one. One of the problem was that Americans and also somehow Europeans were involved, but I think it was led by Americans.
It's mainly an American process, I think.
The same way that now they do it in Ukraine case. Americans negotiated with the Taliban, not involving the government that was elected, with the support of European and American money and blood. Not only money investment, but blood investment as well. They bypassed that. And they went to directly engage with the Taliban. They negotiated the Doha agreement for 3 years in Doha. I met the Taliban before they signed Doha agreement. I met them in February 2019 in Moscow for the first time. And I must say the Taliban that I met in Moscow, their attitudes towards the Republic delegation or the people who went from Kabul was completely different. Because they were after us. They were creating smaller groups of engagement with women in Doha before the actual negotiations start. Also in Moscow, before the agreement was signed, they were creating small group of engagement to allow dialogues, and they were telling me that, please ask any questions that you have. And when there were people who asked questions about what is your policy when you come back to power? They were like, or at least there is a power sharing agreement. What is your policy on women's education and health? They were like, women can absolutely get to up to PhD degree. Women can absolutely get to a government position up to prime minister. And they said that to my face. And it's on the record. But when they signed the deal with Americans, and when we started the official negotiation on September 2020, they were completely different Taliban. They were not accessible to negotiate. They were killing time. They were not open for negotiation. They were becoming difficult. It took us 3 months when we started negotiation just to agree whether we want to start the negotiation based on the Doha agreement or based on Constitution of Afghanistan. The base of our negotiation should be reached. It took us 3 months because they were just passing time. So I think the serious problem was that if the government of Afghanistan was involved from day one, I think we were not put in a position of vulnerability.
The leverage was not there.
There was no more leverage. And that followed by President Biden's announcement to withdraw from Afghanistan without any condition. He did not even respect President Trump's one-sided agreement when he said we will withdraw with conditions when there is a political process. So all of that put together a situation where Taliban did not take the negotiation process serious.
Mm-hmm. If we dig a little bit deeper into the history of conflict in your country, if we look at what happened over the last decades, I mean, the history of Afghanistan is overshadowed by violence, and we can really draw a little bit closer to your own vita that is also a life full of struggle and also of violence. I mean, if I read your biography again the other day, and you are describing really vividly that as a baby you were not meant to live, actually. You were the 19th child of a father who had 7 women, who had 7 wives. You were put out in the sun because your mother was disappointed that you didn't turn out to be a boy. You did survive, obviously, but can you take us a little bit back into those days, back into the late 70s when you were a child, like your first memories? How was that to grow up as a girl in such a polarized environment?
Yeah, you mentioned, Tobias, about Afghanistan being in the center of conflict. I think one of the things that puts Afghanistan in a very important geographical location, which makes it very vulnerable between different superpowers, is its location. Afghanistan is located between Central and South Asia, which, if it was not for conflict and war, Afghanistan could have been a buffer zone in terms of economic connectivity between Central and South Asia, and connects basically Central Asia to the sea. Because Central Asians are all landlocked countries. Like countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, all these Stan countries are landlocked. Through Afghanistan, they could access sea through Pakistan and India.
Yes.
Because of its important geographical location, and our foreign policy is officially like neutral foreign policy. In reality, this has never been practiced because our location is in a way that we cannot be a neutral foreign policy. We were in a way or the other always in the center of invasion, and we have always defeated the invasion. We have always fought for that reason. But when I was born, Afghanistan was in peace, at least. Beginning of, when I was 3 years when the revolution happened, beginning of war. You are right, I was not the favored child because in Afghanistan, a girl does not represent the family. That was at least the perspective when I was born. She does not inherit the family values. That's why the man of the family always preferred to have a boy. So they wanted to have a boy, but I turned to be a girl, and it was not my choice, but I'm very proud of being a girl. My mother initially was not, but then later on she was very proud of having me. So when I was born, I was born also at home in a countryside, in a village. Countryside. So I was put outside because my mother was also very exhausted. So everybody was busy with my mother, and I was outside, just wrapped in a piece of clothes, and I was screaming and crying, and I had sunburn in my face, and sometimes I have these spots, and my mother has passed away, and may her soul rest in peace, because later on she invested all her time for me to go to school, and I was her favorite daughter. But sometimes when I look at the mirror, I'm like, I need to fight with my mother because I still have some signs of the sunburns. Because my father, you're right, my father actually married 7 times, and then it was a symbol of a man's power. That hegemony of power of a man was represented through how many wives he had. And sometimes now my political opposition or people who are critical of my work use that against me. Oh, her father married 7 times. I'm like, I had no decision in that.
It was not my choice.
I was in no position of power to decide about his number of marriages. But yes, in Islam, you can marry up to, in my religion, you can marry up to 4 wives. But the condition is very clear, like clear condition which actually limits. But a lot of men, not only in Afghanistan, but in the rest of Muslim world, I would say, misuse the interpretation to marry more than 1 wife. My father divorced previous wives to have 4 wives at one time. And that's probably why when I grew up and became a member of parliament, I strongly became against polygamy and table laws to ban, because my mother was telling me how she suffered as a woman.
Also, your father was an influential tribal leader, a politician, so to speak.
A member of parliament.
And a member of parliament. And he was building schools, but schools that he wouldn't send his own girls to, right? I mean,
yeah.
From today's perspective, you would have to challenge and fight him. if it was back in the day, right?
Maybe he would have, I would have changed his views, because I had some of my siblings from my step siblings that had initially male, that initially had the same idea of my father. So when I ran for parliament, they wouldn't allow my posters to be put in the, you know, some drivers would put my poster in their car as a sign of like supporting me or etc. So they would stop a driver and say, why did you put my sister's poster in your car? So they tear my poster as a sign of protection, but they didn't know that it actually hurts me. And it's like a conservative views, right? So I had to really, you know, struggle and you know, a lot of energy to change the perspective. And eventually, instead of me being called as my brother's sister, then they called my brothers as my brothers, right? So that took a lot of struggle as well. For my father, yes, he was the one who actually established school in our village, the first school for girls. But my elder sisters that were elder than me were never allowed to go to school, because my father thought that he will lose the vote of conservative community. Back then, maybe Afghanistan, there were some people who were against, many actually had the same mentality of Taliban. They didn't want their girls to go to school. But the same community, when I was a member of parliament, and it's on the record, like I have their videos and photos in my social media, including, came to me with turban, with big turban, because that's the tradition, with very elderly, like with white beard. They would come to me and they would ask me to build school for their girls. And I asked them why, because one of the BBC journalists once came to my office and said, you know, why these people come to your office? And I said, they want school for their, he was making a documentary. They want school for their girls. And he asked the same question. He said, why do they want a school for their girls in the same community where I was not able to go to school until my father was killed, and then we had to flee our village? They said, if my daughter, one of the elders said, if my daughter become like Ms. Koofi, I want her to go to school. So we need good role models as women to be able to influence and change the perspective, be it in Afghanistan or in Austria or in Germany or in the United States. I think you need good role models in politics to influence people's perspective.
You mentioned that your mother obviously switched her position, and she saved you, right? She was then eventually the one who did save you, although you were not meant to live. But was she a role model then for you? Did she become a role model?
A lot, yes. My mother was not an educated woman, but she was such a graceful and strong and resilient woman that after my father was killed in a peace mission, when the first time the revolution started in Afghanistan, my father was asked, because he was a member of parliament in the National Assembly, he was asked by then the government, which was a republic, Dawood's government. He was asked to go and to talk to Mujahideen, which were the fighters in the mountains then, to ask them to come and join the government and do not fight, because the government is strong, they will kill them, they will, you know. And then the government changed. It was actually the communist-backed regime. They asked my father to go and talk with the fighters, with the jihadi groups. When my father was on his way to the mountains with a lot of people, like 1,000 people, elders, all elders with no guns. So the Mujahideen started shooting at my father. The rest of the people, had to run away. But my father, they arrested him alive and they killed him. So then we had to flee our village because our house was looted several times, my mother was beaten several times, etc. So then I continued, my mother enrolled me in school, but she then took care of all my siblings from my father. She was very young when she was widow, but she was very committed to the family values, and she took responsibility. And she was always, telling me that you will be something in the future. So she put a lot of trust on me. And she was beaten up by all the warring parties, whoever was in power, they would come to our house, they would beat my mother, they would ask her to give my father's wealth and all of that. So she was really a strong woman, very strong. And she actually died very young, only 52 when she died, because of all the struggles that she has, endured during the time that she was.
So it is not only that you are at peace with her, you are also seeing her as an inspiration.
Very strong woman, yeah, and very resilient.
when we continue to focus on the violence that Afghanistan has seen and the very own violence that you have experienced, that comes to mind the assassination attempts that you were a victim of. And I remember we talked a couple of months after the second assassination attempt, and you were describing to me how you were taken to hospital. Your daughter was sitting next to you, and I asked this silly journalistic question, how did you feel or what came to your mind? And I remember you said, I felt absolute silence at that moment. Could you take our audience a little bit to that moment? Why was it silence? Why was it not anger, frustration, fear? Why was it silence?
So yeah, when the peace negotiation team was formed, it was 21 members were supposed to represent the Republic, and we were supposed to go to Doha to negotiate with 21 members, Taliban members of negotiation. So the negotiation team was formed in March 2000, and we were supposed to go, but the Taliban were delayed.
2020.
I'm sorry, 2020. So then we went to, there was always continued delay by the Taliban to start the negotiation. We used these, this was also COVID time as well, but we used these moments to engage with people, especially with victims of war. Because, of course, everyone in Afghanistan is a victim of war. And I can see that there are like at least 3-4 people from Afghanistan here. I'm sure if you ask them, they have a lot of stories that, talks about how them or their family been victim of war. Either we have lost somebody in our family, or we had to flee our village, or as a woman, education opportunity or any opportunity was taken away from us. So we wanted to listen to the victims of war. And because it was the first time that women were included in the peace negotiation, the first time in the history of Afghanistan, we wanted to make sure that it's a different process, that we show that it's we show the difference by being there. So listening to war victim was very, very important for us. And although everybody was victim, we had big consultation gathering where we brought civil society representatives, families of those who lost lives or physically challenged because they lost parts of their body in the war. So we constantly, despite having the COVID and we have like face masks, we still continue to engage with people. There was one family who probably my friends from Afghanistan, the Afghan friends remember. He was, it was a family that she lost 3 of her sons in the army. And the third one, when she heard about that, she got a heart attack and she also immediately died. And it's heart-wrenching for any human being, right? Yeah. It can melt your heart. So I decided to go on a Friday, which is weekend in Afghanistan. I decided to go to, and it was in Shamali Valley, like close to Kabul, maybe around 100 kilometers from Kabul. I decided to go also like for a change also during Friday, but also to meet this family. So I went to meet the family. They had like young children, all widows and poor and orphans, like very bad situation. So I went to the mountain to meet the family, and on my return, I could see that there is a red car that is chasing us. I usually was traveling with an armored car because that was the regulation from also being in the peace negotiation. It was provided, by the government. Armored car. So then I had a normal car for my security. But traveling very long distance with armored car can be suffocating, right? So in the middle of the road, I changed from armored car and I took the ordinary car. Because I wanted to breathe a little bit of fresh oxygen, put the glass down, and it was outside the city, outside the, the pollution. So my daughter was also with me because she would always travel with me. And if you see all my photos, most of it, she's with me like a kid. Now, of course, she's grown up. She's 25, but then she was a kid. So we came back and this red car was chasing us. At some point, I changed the cars also to shift his focus. Where we got to a point, there was no traffic in Karabakh district of Parwan. We came to a point where there was no traffic, and I asked the driver, I said, you need to speed up because there is no traffic and this car in our behind is chasing us.
So you could sense the danger from behind? Or?
I didn't know that he's going to shoot. I don't know, I wasn't feeling safe. I thought, why is he chasing from very long distance? And he was waiting for an opportunity. to shoot. So this, it was 7 o'clock in the evening, still not very dark, but it was getting dark. And I had the bodyguard in my front, my daughter in my left, and I was sitting on the right. We were moving, and the car came, and as my driver was taking speed, he turned. He blocked the road. I didn't know that there were two, actually. As he blocked the road, then we noticed that he's something serious. Then there was shooting from the backside. So the plan was, when there was an opportunity, he will block the road and then they will shoot. As he started shooting, the driver speeded up, and it was a Benz car. When there is speed, the Benz, it's their characteristic that they actually lower, so the risks of falling apart is reduced. My driver speeded up and went to outside the asphalted road, like to a land, a piece of, agricultural land, just to escape the attention. I was holding the car like this, and so the second shoot came. When the first shoot came, my hand kind of fall, and I put my daughter's head under the seat because I didn't want anything to happen to her, because I would never forgive myself if this happened to her for my work. So my hand fall, and I wanted to see what's happening. When I touched, blood was coming, and my hand was full of blood. And I said to everybody, I said, I think I'm being injured. The second and third shooting.
So it was the blood that you felt, but no pain?
No pain immediately. Okay. The pain was like a small needle goes into your body. It's like that when you first time, I hope nobody experienced in their life that, but it's like that. Then the second shooting came, it was in the car, the third, and it was like that. So we went to the land, and then the driver really, really speeded up, and then we came back to the main road. And when we came back to the main road was a police checkpost. So then the police was there, and then so the security did not want to shoot back because it was not an armored car. If he shoot back, there was a clash.
Yes.
And definitely all of us would have been killed.
Fire going back and forth.
Exactly,
yes.
Fire. So then we went to when we saw the checkpost, the bodyguard put the glass down and said, it's Ms. Koofi in the car, she's being attacked. And they knew me, of course, so they gave a ranger car to escort us. We went. While there was silence for a moment, it was of course I was bleeding, so my my energy was getting down. But also for a moment, and my daughter was screaming. She was telling me that you have no right to close your eye. You need to keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. So she was doing that. And for a moment, I was not even for a moment, I was thinking maybe this is the end of it, right? I didn't know that I will get safe to the hospital because I didn't know how deep was the wound. It was just bleeding. But for a moment, I was like, what did I do wrong? And so wrong to the extent that this guy or whoever they are could be so hurt that they plan it and they invest so much on a woman, right? I was feeling like, what did I do wrong? So as a woman, I think even if it's not our fault, even if it's somebody else's fault for doing that nasty stuff, but we blame ourselves.
I was going to say, it sounds like you were victimizing yourself in a way. What did I do wrong?
Exactly.
Rather than what did this guy do to me? That's a
crime.
crime.
I was trying to remember, everything I did was, at least in my time as a parliamentarian, was building road in my village and community and raising the woman voice, because it wasn't even easy then. But why would this guy plan it? And there were two cars. One was the red that I still remember, the guy who actually turned and blocked our car. Anyways.
So this brief.
Sometimes it's very heavy to talk about this.
Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't dwell on it then. But just this very last question on this subject. So this brief moment of silence, was it some sort of closure because you were feeling like this could be the end?
It was a closure for me because, I'm always scared of how I will die. We're always, as a human being, we think about this, right? We think, when we close our eyes, sometimes when we are with ourselves, we think about how is it going to be the end of this world for any of us. So I always think, sometimes when I'm in the planes and there is a turbulence and turmoil, and I'm like, maybe this is the end of it, right? When I was attacked first time in 2010, I thought this is maybe the end of it. So there was two car accidents. I thought this is the end of it. But this time, This time, because I have seen it, it was in front of my eyes. I was like, basically, that's why it came to me. What did I do wrong? Because I was, my life, as a teenager, as a child, as a member of parliament, as an active, whoever I was, my life was like a film in front of my eyes.
Okay.
And in all of this, I was like, what did I do wrong? Did I hurt this guy? Why this guy or the group be so hurt by what I did, to be my enemy?
Did you eventually find an answer to that? Was the guy arrested, and could you find an answer? What, in your own words, you did wrong, or what annoyed him so much that he felt like that he had to terminate your life?
So there was an investigation, like any other any other targeted assassination in Afghanistan. There was an investigation, and I told I extended full cooperation to our intelligence and Ministry of Interior. Their intelligence came to my bed in the hospital several times. The ministers themselves came several times, and of course there was an international condemnation. Everybody wanted to have an answer to that. So I actually gave the whole transparent process, the same way that I explained to you. I explained to them when I was better, I could move. I went to that place and I showed them this happened here. And I think there was like a 2 months of investigation, and I said I remember these guys who actually blocked my road. So if you bring me photos of those, either ISIS or Taliban, or even criminals, I would know, because you should have that. They didn't bring that, but after 2 months, they brought a file to me that after thorough investigation, it shows that it was a terroristic attack. And I was like, if I didn't know it was a terroristic attack, I knew, but I need some more details. But that detail was never given to me.
You were just saying that, that there was sort of this film of your life in front of your eyes. If we sort of go a little bit back within this film, go back to the first Taliban regime, you were a medical student back then, and you would have become a doctor and not a political activist. So the Taliban basically took away 5 years of your education because they were banning you going to medical school then. And that was the beginning of your political career, your aspiration to become active and to fight? Or?
I think so. I think so, Tobias. I mean, now, when the first time it was 5 years that they took away education opportunities from women and work opportunities, and it took us 20 years to compensate. It took us 20 years to compensate. And still we were behind. That's why we had quotas. We had constitutional quota to have female in the parliament. We had quota also in education, for instance. In our civil reform law, for women to be recruited in the government offices, we had quotas because we needed to fill the gap, right? The discrepancies. It took us 20 years. Now, I don't know how many years it will take to compensate for the years that our young girls are prohibited from schools. It's heart-wrenching to even think about it, that we have taken everything so much for granted, and we thought that it will never happen to our sisters, but it happened to our sisters. Yes, it was during Taliban when they put my husband in jail in 1997, when I was just married, and it was like 10 days after my marriage. They came and they took my husband, and he was released the next day. And the reason was that he married me, and I come from a political family. He was a professor at the university. He was not even a politically active person. So 2 months later, they came again, and they arrested him. And I remember how they were entering our house from the walls, and how they were knocking with a lot of fear. When some of my friends now from Afghanistan, they tell me that either their husband is being arrested or a woman is being arrested, the whole thing comes in front of my eyes that this is the same situation they're experiencing. So then it took me like 4 months to release my husband. I went to every Taliban office, and I wrote letter to every Taliban minister or intelligence or everybody, because I was educated, right? So if a woman is educated, she's not only helping herself, but helping others. So then I released my husband, and when I was going to all these offices, the behavior they did to me, and on the streets I was seeing other women, the behavior they did to others, that was like, this cannot be politics. Politics is better. We need to change this. So that was the time that although I come from a political family, and it was in my gene probably, but during Taliban first time was when I started to think that politics should be more about how we can help people, not about how we can kill and suppress people.
Was it also a means for you to sort of liberate yourself and to find your voice against something oppressive or against a system that doesn't include you as a woman?
Absolutely, yes. I actually resisted once one of the Taliban commanders. I later on found out that he passed away, he died. You know, the intelligence department number 3 of the Taliban was one of the most brutal department. And for people who have been working on Afghanistan or know the history, they know that the intelligence number 3 was always the brutal department. So they put my husband in intelligence number 3, and every Friday I could go to see him. And he was always like, his health was getting bad and he got tuberculosis, etc. And he died as a consequence of that. So once I went there, and you know, I had nail polish. I had pink nail polish because I was a newly married woman, right? I had pink nail polish and I had burqa. And I was holding my burqa like this with my pink nail polish. And this Taliban commander came to me, close to me, and said, "Are you Hamid's wife?" I said, "Yes." And I was very happy. Maybe he has a good news for me. So he picked up a stone and he was holding a pot of water because he was doing ablution, Friday prayers. With one hand, the other hand, he picked up the stone and he wanted to throw to me, and he was like, "Go away, you're complaining everywhere that we are torturing your husband, and now you're here with your nail polish, you know, with your hands and nail polish and all of that."
So even pink nail polish could be a threat.
Yeah, and then I started, and that day I didn't really respond. I was like completely shattered. You know, I was a medical college student, a respected family, relatively like very high profile family. I always respected. To see that the man is behaving like that, I was completely shattered. I was like, no matter what's going to happen to my husband, I am not going to come to this prison anymore. But next Friday, of course, I was a newly married couple, and that is like resistance, right? Next Friday, I said, okay, I'm not going to stay, I'm going to go there. And I prepared myself, and I said, no matter what, this time I'm going to challenge him. So he came, I went there, and this was the only time they would allow. It was prayers time, 12:30 prayers time. So he allowed prayers time, and he came with his water again because he was preparing for prayers, Friday prayers, and he was like, "Are you here again, Hamid's wife?" And I prepared myself and I said, either they're going to kill me or put me in prison, I'm going to put. So I started challenging him. I said, "You call yourself Muslim, but you know what? And you call yourself that women should not be with a male companion. But I'm a newly married woman, and I don't have my husband with me, and you are actually accusing him for, you know, you don't have any accusation. His only crime is that he married me." So I like started, you know, to the standards of then. Now Afghanistan is transformed. All these young activists, very brave, they challenged him even in a much more severe way, I would say. Very, very inspiring. They challenged him, they stand on their face. But to the standards of like 26 years ago, 27 years ago, this was quite a stance. And he smiled because he didn't expect this from me.
Made him laugh.
A woman under burqa. And he said, "Go and bring somebody to release, as a guarantee to release your husband."
But they are still 26, 27 years later, a reality again in Afghanistan.
One small reality, not all reality. One part of reality.
They are governing, their regime is governing the country. And what is a way out of that? What would you say? Is it negotiations again? Is it sitting together? What would have to happen?
Well, the way forward is so the way forward is obviously not very easy. It's a very complex situation. At least I can understand that because I have been closely working before that, but in the past 3 years, I have been working with all the political forces and the civic forces and the women movement especially. I know it's not easy. However, because it's a very complex situation, Afghanistan is very diverse and very polarized. And I think it's a good thing that we have differences of opinions, but it's important that we talk. And it's good that this Vienna process is giving the platform for us to talk. Instead of using bullets against one another, we use the words, which is a good thing, right? So the way forward, I think, first of all, the political opposition should unite. If not on everything, at least on few things, which is important for Afghanistan. But the political opposition does not have that space, including women. They do not have the space. Nobody gives them the space. I mean, it's good that Austria is hosting this and allowing political oppositions to come and talk. But honestly speaking, we had some conferences, like for the first time we organized the All-Afghan Women Summit last year in Tirana, Albania, where we brought 140 Afghan women, including 25 from inside Afghanistan. And I know it's not easy. So that needs a lot of commitment. In this case, for instance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Albania personally committed his time to facilitate visa. So I think there should be a space for us to talk. Once we talk and we unite around few things, I think there will be, Taliban will be divided, and that division will create some leverage for opposition.
But why is it so difficult to unite? I mean, it's been more than 3 years, and the process is still going on. It might be an overly simplistic question, but why isn't it easier to unite against the Taliban and to have this discussion process?
We are united against Taliban. I think what we need to unite is more than being against Taliban. We need to unite on a vision for Afghanistan, because obviously to unite against Taliban, once the Taliban are not there, it will lead to chaos. We need to unite on post-Taliban, on what could a government post-Taliban look like, on what would a constitution look like, on what are our core principles that we all can agree on. We don't have resources to talk about any of this. When it was our own country, we didn't have to pay for a room like this to have a meeting. But now we are living in different parts of the world. For us to come together, we need expenses, right? We need space, the physical space. We need somehow some political support. I'm not saying political support to the extent that Western world should come and do everything for us. No, no. We want to do things ourselves, but we need the basic things to mobilize ourselves.
So you're not calling for another Western invention, because that obviously in 2001 happened, and 20 years later, basically the same government was back in power. The Taliban were back in power, so it was 20 years.
No, I'm not saying for a military invasion, but what I'm saying is that, and I'm not saying that the world should come and write papers for us for a narrative. What I'm saying is that the world should look beyond humanitarian aid and should have a political prospect for Afghanistan, and should think Afghanistan issue is interconnected to the global security, and have some level of political commitment. Because for now, the world agenda is occupied by Middle East crisis, by, of course, African countries crisis from Sudan to DRC, and by Ukraine. Because Ukraine is in your own continent, so you call that your own war. I think Afghanistan collapse to Taliban has a direct impact in Ukraine war. If Afghanistan was not handed over to Taliban, the Ukraine war would never happen. So I think
why would you?
Because I think the global North lost its moral power, honestly, by paving the way for Taliban return to Afghanistan. And that's why I think Russia used that weakness. And I think, the Ukrainians were also, a lot of people question how reliable the global North could be as a partner. If they're leaving you in the middle of nowhere and you trust them so much, and all of a sudden you just, they go away and you fall. That's what happened to us, right? Maybe it was our mistake because we relied so much. And that's why I'm saying that we should not rely on, we don't want the international community to do things for us. And I'm glad that we are in a process, and some of the processes we lead, including the All-Afghan Women Summit, we did not translate the papers. We did not translate the papers from English or German or French. We did it ourselves. We wrote it in our own languages because we want to own our own papers and narrative.
Right. You were mentioning the mistakes that were committed by the West. What were the own mistakes committed by Afghan government, by Afghan politicians? Do you see also? The
first thing was that we were divided, unfortunately, and that there was an absolute dependency on foreign forces, on foreign policies. That notion of, sovereignty and self-determination that you mentioned, that was basically getting weaker and weaker. And we thought that, the West will never withdraw from Afghanistan because Afghanistan has a strategic location and importance for them. Why would they withdraw? So we actually over-trusted that partnership. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. And also we were divided. There were corruption inside Afghanistan government. It's absolutely the reason, if not the main reason, because there are other governments who are also very corrupt. But in corruption in Afghanistan, especially not paying our salary for our security forces, not paying, the teacher salary or the staff employee salary, this resulted in our security forces losing their morale. So a combination of all.
And a way forward, would that be an inclusive government with the Taliban and members of the opposition that are meeting in Vienna and at other places? Would that be a government without Taliban? What would be your vision for that?
To be honest, realistically is to have a government that the Taliban will be one part of it, but based on the will of people. Now, this idea probably, what I say, is not really favored a lot among a lot of opposition because they think there should be a government without the Taliban. But as you said, for whatever reasons, for the motives that we know, Afghanistan was handed over to the Taliban. Now they're controlling Afghanistan. So I think we need to probably form, if we want to avoid further war and conflict, we need to form a government that a small part will be Taliban based on how much support they have. And then the rest of society, ethnic groups, religious groups, women groups, the non-Taliban people, the non-Taliban Afghans should also be part of that process. So to be realistic, that is a long-term path for Afghanistan.
I was going to ask, what's the time frame here we're talking? You're saying long-term. Is that 2 years, 10 years down the road? What would you say? It's difficult to make predictions in Afghanistan.
Exactly. You're an Afghanistan expert. The one thing that you cannot predict in Afghanistan is the political change. It might happen tomorrow. You never know. Or it might happen in 1 year time. But from what I see in terms of fragmentation within Taliban, I think that will shorten their survival time. But that does not mean that there will be a dramatic change that the opposition will go or the opposition inside Afghanistan will create a government. That weakening process will give us leverage to form a political process, including the fraction that want to politically survive.
You are internationally admired, I would say, for your strong voice. You come from Munich, from the security conference. You are in Vienna. You just told me about your schedule that is basically full all the way until April with conferences, with speeches, with public appearances. But you are also a controversial woman, at least in Afghanistan. And some Afghans would say that you found a way to put your own benefit over that of the people. Is that a criticism when it comes from your own people or from certain parts of your own people that hurts you, or what does that do with you?
I know as a person who have been active for 20 years and always very vocal. I was a political opposition for the previous republic. And I think I'm very proud of the fact that I was one of the few, I'm not saying the only one of the few who actually started this culture of politically and a civic way oppose the government for if there was something wrong. Especially my usual opposition was the fact that the government is so centered in Kabul, it's not reaching out to the provinces. It was about the corruption and power-centric, which actually was the result of the government collapse. So I was right in what I was saying. And I was always, tabling laws in support of women that will hurt a lot of men. I would say, for instance, when I ban a child marriage, when I ban in the law multi-marriage, this will definitely hurt a lot of people who married young girls or who married 3-4 times. And there were some duality. So I'm not saying that, I never had a mistake in my life, but I think most of the time I was misunderstood. I was misunderstood and misinterpreted for what I was doing. Now, of course, after what happened to Afghanistan, I'm personally hurt. I am personally hurt because I was engaged in peace process and was hoping that there will be a process where I will be part of history in a good way, that we signed the political agreement, and then Afghanistan will be a home for everybody, including the Taliban. But it didn't go that way. And I was hurt because I'm hurt and because of what happened to my sisters in Afghanistan. I'm in contact with them. It's very painful, Tobias. It is very painful when you talk to them. They cry, they get emotional, they're arrested, including like today, one woman who was in my party with her 4 children. I showed you the picture. She was taken by Pakistan police to be deported to Afghanistan. And she lost her husband in Kabul last year. She's the only woman of her children, the only parent, single parent. So it is a very, very difficult time for me, and I need to speak up, right? I need to use and knock any door along with my other sisters, because for now, women are like the strong, visible voice against women. I need to knock doors and ask the international community to support. And this might hurt some Taliban supporters. This might hurt some people who do not want to see women. And they go to any level to label anything. But I can assure you that in speaking on behalf of women does not have any personal interest, because I instead could invest myself on something different and gain from that. But I'm investing myself pro bono, my time for the women of Afghanistan. So except that I get a lot of hatred to the Taliban supporters, including real security challenge, because even in London I was alerted where I live, was alerted for security challenges that I face and possible consequences of my position in working with ICC, in working with ICJ, in working with Human Rights Commission, along with my other sisters. I'm not alone. In fact, I'm one of the hundreds of voices. Our younger generation is much more vocal than me, and I'm very proud of them. So for this, people can go to any extent. But all of these are accusations, I can reassure you, because if they had really anything valid and tangible, they would have already used it in media against me. But it's all propaganda against any woman that is strong enough. And sometimes they went to even kill me. And I said, what did I do wrong?
So it's not that this criticism doesn't face you at all. You recognize it. It hurts. Some aspects of it hurt. There's also sometimes even the allegations against your family being engaged in illegal business activities. Those are also allegations that you constantly, or that from a certain part of people, you always have to deal with. Is it something you can just shove off, or?
No, initially when I was receiving these kind of accusations, it was shocking. It was like, why would they say this? How it's possible? It was like really hurting me, and I was really frustrated. But over time, I was like, if this is a characteristic of a strong woman in politics, let them say it, right? Because if they had anything tangible, they would always bring it to the media. The only thing tangible they had recently was one of my voices that I sent in a group. I shared in a group, a WhatsApp group, when one of my party members was arrested 2 years back, and her name is Zarifah Yaqubi. You know her. She's in Canada now. She was arrested, and her family and her friends were contacting me like, Ms. Koofi, you were in negotiation, you need to help her get released, etc. And the voice message I sent, I said, I'm in contact with Taliban intelligence, and I hope that I will get her released. So they cut the rest of my voice, and this part they used that I'm in contact with Taliban intelligence. They used it all over recently, like, oh, she's in contact with Taliban intelligence, so she don't trust her. I negotiated with the Taliban, right?
Right.
I negotiated with them, and I will probably negotiate with them if time comes, because that's the whole end of any war is negotiation.
Right.
You cannot wash blood with blood. You need to wash blood with water. And if time comes, these are the women who will actually wash the blood with water. So probably we will be the water that will wash. So I will negotiate. But this voice was particularly in support of my friend who was arrested. So they actually posted, and I was like, if they really had anything serious about any allegation they had against me, they would always use it. But you know that this is very common when you are a woman, a strong woman, strong in your way that you actually focus and determine yourself and give your time and yourself to your cause. You have a lot of enemies, and the fact that I'm always in public, I think I should expect more. So maybe the next time something you should expect is if there is a security threat and real challenge for me in Europe even.
Right. We will come to an end. I will have my very last question to you, and that is listening to you and sort of visioning or looking at all the roadblocks you were facing in your life, even the threats to your life. I wonder where you take your resilience from. What is your recipe for being resilient?
I take my resilience from my daughters. I have 2 daughters. Both of them recently got their masters. One of them actually had a full paid scholarship at LSE, London School of Economics. She graduated from that, and I was very proud because as a single mother, people would always tell me, oh, you need to get married because you don't have a son, your life is not completed. But I committed to myself that I will make my life completed with these 2 daughters. They will get education, and they did got education. Both of them got their master. When I posted my daughter's photo on social media that I'm very proud of you for being at LSE, and not a lot, some people would come to me and, oh, it's all the corruption money that you actually used to pay for your daughter at LSE. But my daughter actually got a full paid scholarship at LSE, which I was not even aware she applied. So I'm very proud and get my inspiration from my daughters, from the women and girls of Afghanistan, and from the fact that Afghanistan has even experienced worse situation. I think not as worse as it is now for women, but worse situation of wars and chaos, and we have overcome. We will overcome this too, because my country deserves a better leadership. My country deserves a better image internationally. And as I was saying to Ambassador Wolfgang, I'm actually hoping a day that all of you are our friends at difficult times, that we will walk in my gardens or in any garden and park in Afghanistan when times come that Afghanistan becomes the home of everybody. So my resilience comes from my passion for my country, that it deserves a better, because I have experienced better times. And I know that most people in Afghanistan, they are hospitable, they love to live in a peace and coexistence with the rest of the world. Taliban and their ideologies do not represent them. They deserve a better government and better leadership.
Ms. Koofi, thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you.